Cool.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, I guess we'll kick this off. Okay. Hello, my name is Sarah Martin. I am the moderator for this panel hosted by Viva la Animacion, and we are presenting the breaking into editing for animation with two editors that I know very well, Maria Lasalle and Priscilla Zambrano. Very happy to have them both here.
Mhm.
And a quick little summary of who I am. I'm a part of the Viva la Animacion animation team, and I also am a social media specialist for SIFA Hollywood and for the Annie Awards, which the Annie Awards are kind of like the Oscars for animation. And the SIFA Hollywood has a lot of incredible opportunities when it comes to animation preservation. We have a lot of really cool in-person screenings, which will include Elio and Utopia too. So if you guys are members, there's going to be free screenings for that. And more importantly, I am a post-production coordinator at Sony Pictures Animation, where I'm helping coordinate both feature and series animation. So working on all the shows, all the things. And I've had past editorial experience at Stupid Betty, post-production experience at Titmouse, and I've done maybe too much within the past few years. And a quick introduction to Maria. I've left her bio, but I'll have them introduce themselves. But my intro with Maria is that we were both post-production interns at DreamWorks Animation and feature animation, and we got to work on Kung Fu Panda 3, which I think is still insane to this day that we got to work on it and help deliver it. And we also spent a lot of time in the data IO department. We got to work on a lot of tapes. We got to see a lot of DreamWorks TV stuff. We got to see a lot of early works for Captain Underpants, Trolls, Boss Baby, and in the early stages of the last How to Train Your Dragon. There's a lot of tears. It was really emotional, but overall, really great experience. And to see how far Maria has come from that and become like an assistant editor on Final Space and now an editor for an unknown Adult Swim film or Adult Swim show, it's been incredible to see Maria progress so far. So I'm very happy to have her on this panel. And we also have Priscilla, which I worked with on Adult Swim's Robot Chicken, an incredible AE. I try to get her on every project I'm working on. And I think my partner always fangirls about the fact that you work on Superman and Lois. That was a big thing for him. So he's not on the call today, but he is really sad that he's missing the call. But anyways, I'm very excited to have both of these editors on with us. And before we kick it off, this is presented by Viva la Animacion, which is a vibrant community empowering and connecting legend storytellers to share their unique narratives through animation. So we have a lot of in-person events, a lot of virtual events. So through this link, you can access our Instagram, our Discord server, and all of the good things that Viva la Animacion has to offer. So I'm going to quickly stop sharing. I'm going to grab my questions and we're going to get started. But in the meantime, can Priscilla and Maria, can you introduce yourselves, what your current job title is, and just a quick overview of your career so far? We can start it off with Priscilla first.
Um, Hi everyone, I'm Priscilla. I'm an assistant editor. I've done a whole bunch of things. Okay, we'll start at the beginning. I started off in social media before jumping into promos and then going into animation. So I kind of started my career in scripted TV in animation, and then I jumped into live action television. And from there, I've gone on to do like indie features, and I had the chance to work on on a feature last year that was like a bigger studio. But yeah, I worked with Sarah on Robot Chicken. That was like my first scripted uh, anything, and have always like valued her time and patience for teaching me kind of like everything that I grew to learn at Stupid Buddy. And yeah, I've just always yeah, that's my thing. I'm still an assistant editor. While I was on Robot Chicken, I did get a chance to edit as well, so I did get an animatic editor credit for a couple episodes. And thanks to like the mentorship and just like the help I got from everyone there. So yeah, that's me.
Nice. I will jump in. So after my experience with Sarah and our internship, that was my final year in college. Afterwards, I started uh assistant editing in the independent documentary space and did that for about a year and a half, where then I shifted into becoming an assistant editor in animation on Final Space. And after that, it's sort of been a bit of a whirlwind jumping from studio to studio, project to project. I've been fortunate enough to have worked with some amazing creatives that have liked me enough to sort of like bring me along with them to different projects. And so it's gone from Shadow Machine to Netflix to Octopi, Green Street Studios, and now I'm working for Adult Swim on an I can't really disclose the show I'm on right now, but it's a fun time. And I'm currently working as an editor.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. So just to kick it off, what inspired you both to become an editor, and what steps did you take to prepare for your first own editorial?
Yeah, I guess really early on as a kid, I fell in love with movies really early on, and I just didn't really have the vocabulary to sort of express like what it was about it that I truly loved. I just knew I wanted to be a part of it, no matter like what role it I had. And so as I grew up and I sort of uh, took this more seriously, discovered editorial as a path and really akin to sort of putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And I thought it was incredibly collaborative, incredibly interesting, and a really cool creative outlet. And from there, it was just reading as much as I could over it, reading about different editors, different techniques, going to college for it, and going to as many workshops as I could, and just editing my friend's stuff in my free time, quite honestly.
Oh, that's great. And did you create a reel or a portfolio when applying to any of these editorial jobs?
Yes. So early on, it just started with projects that resulted from my time at college, and again, just a mishmash of uh, some of my friends' student films and personal projects. And then as time went on, it's been um, working with my friends who have become storyboard artists and me helping them with their personal projects further on. And um, admittedly, I've been a bit more laid back when it comes to creating that reel. I feel like the reel is really useful to get your first job in the door
Mhm.
and to sort of give a good idea of what your skill set is and what your sensibilities are in an animatic or editorial sense. But after that, it's really all about the performance. Like
Mhm.
there's a saying that you're only as good as your last gig, or as good as your last performance at your last gig was. So thankfully, it's been a lot of word of mouth as opposed to having to update my reel.
That's awesome. That's really great to hear. Oh, and then how about you, Priscilla?
For me, I actually didn't know I wanted to do anything related to editorial until a lot later than I think most people. I have always liked anything that mixed like the technical with the creative. So when I was younger in high school, I pirated a version of like Photoshop from like 1996 because I wanted to be a graphic designer. And through like lots of Googling and like YouTube videos, just kind of taught myself how to use like the Adobe ecosystem. So by the time I got to college, I was actually doing a lot more videography than film. If anyone know, I went to UC Davis, which is in Northern California, and anyone who knows UC Davis knows it is not a film school. It is a small town where there's lots of farmland, and it's a very like agricultural school with the tiniest film department you'll ever see in any school ever. And so I was a little bit of a big fish in a small pond in that environment. And so I did a lot of videography back then, just doing like events, or, they would hire me to do conferences. I was working for a studio on campus, and I'm actually from LA. And so when I graduated and I came back home, I just assumed that I could find work, with those skills that I picked up. Once I kind of I learned how to edit, and I was like, no, this is it. Like this is kind of what I want, what I liked so much about it. I just loved like putting pieces together, even if it wasn't like what people would call creative, right? A lot of videos or event videography isn't like a film. It's not in the same like vein of creativity that a lot of people think, but I've always liked any version of editing. I think I could edit weddings for the rest of my life and be happy, you know? Um, and so when I graduated, I didn't really think that it was an option for me to do film or TV. Because I met a lot of people who had been trying to do it their whole lives, or they went to quote unquote real film schools, or, to break in. And I just thought it wasn't for me, which is fine. But, like, it's like, you meet people, or I met people, and you go to networking events and you meet people who are like actually doing TV, actually doing film. And you realize, oh no, this is like a real thing. Like people like me are doing this and they're getting paid for it, and it's a real job. So I kind of figured I had nothing to lose by trying. And that's kind of it, and I just feel like I've been very lucky. It's like Maria was saying just now. It's just been, you kind of meet people and you gain a little bit of reputation, others who want to work with you and will continue to hire you. And it just kind of snowballs into, something fulfilling, hopefully.
No, that's awesome. And I wanted to add too, since I started out in editorial before going into post, where I kind of also just stumbled into it, and I got lucky enough where I got an internship through Stupid Buddy. So after graduating from Cal Arts and after applying to like, let's say 300 to 400 jobs, it's very difficult. Like 2 years of just trying to find jobs. Thankfully, I got my internship through my Nickelodeon internship boss, that was the roommates for that post supervisor at Stupid Buddy, that recommended me for the editorial job as an AE. And I think from there, from like struggling for the first few months and being like, what is this pipeline? What is stop motion? I think later on I discovered how much I love editorial. And then I discovered how much I love post-production. And then everything kind of like fell into place after that. And I would say
Yeah.
at CalArts too, it's more like exploration, where I'm like, I want to be a cinematographer, but I also want to give other positions and roles and just I wanted to explore all the different types of departments within like animation and film. So I kind of fell into post-production and animation.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question is, as I'm looking at the time, I'm going to skip over. Can you both share your usual day-to-day schedules as an editor with us? And specifically with Priscilla, I would love for you to kind of break down your day-to-day schedule when you're working on Robot Chicken, especially because stop motion, I feel, is a lot different compared to 2D and the 3D animation pipeline.
Do you mind if I take this first, Maria, or do you want to go first?
Please
Okay.
go.
Just to out myself to everyone else in the call, I did print out these questions and I have notes here. And all I wrote under this question was, oh God, because everything every day on Robot Chicken was so different. And it's like, Robot Chicken was not only my first scripted show, it was also my first time doing animation in any form. It's also stop motion. So it's not really animation. It's not like most animation that's out there. So, and this was like, I later worked at Titmouse very, very briefly right after Robot Chicken. And I found very quickly that not only like every company does things differently, like on top of it being like a completely new show, like every company will have their own proprietary way of doing things to doing kind of like the same thing. So I guess like a day-to-day schedule as on Robot Chicken, it really depended on where we were. If it was animatics, that was I love animatics. It's like the most creative you can be in post-production, in my opinion. And that if we were in animatics, it was a lot of like, doing a lot of sound effects work on animatics. And the fun thing about sound effects, because I've done sound effects work in live action and animation. And the thing about animation is you have to build everything from the ground up. There's no production audio. There's no, like, you don't have room tone to play with. You don't have like the sounds of a door closing. And sometimes you have to replace those too. But like there's no, you build everything from zero, from sketches, from storyboards. So it was a lot of temp sound effects, a lot of scratch voiceover. You can, like, in the early stages of Robot Chicken, I think like half of my voice was used for those storyboards because it was so hard to, sometimes it would be hard. We were also in the middle of the pandemic, so it could be hard to get actors in to record their lines. Later down the line, if we were getting animation back, it was a lot of organizing those shots as they came in to make sure that, and Robot Chicken is sketch comedy, so we're not just organizing by like which shot goes where, but it's also which shot belongs to which sketch. And, because it's stop motion animation, you don't draw everything in like each shot. It's not so clear cut. Like sometimes you'll have a shot that's in stop motion, but you'll have multiple versions of the shot because maybe it's VFX. You'll be filming elements, a VFX element for it that will be placed on top of what's it called, of a plate, or you'll have like 6 elements for one shot. And it was a lot of figuring out, it was literally like a puzzle. If anyone has ever built like a 3D puzzle that kind of built outwards, it was a lot like that. And yeah, it changed day to day. We were working on multiple episodes at a time and different stages of lock, so it was a lot of switching around, and kind of being able to be adaptable was so important on that show. And trying to keep, if you're organized from the beginning, you'll be fine through the rest of the show, but you have to be organized at the beginning, otherwise you're screwed, because it's very easy to get like mixed up in all of the different moving parts. So yeah, and also just, having a good attitude really helped. That's the most important part of my day-to-day was having a good attitude. Otherwise, everything falls apart.
That's true. This is
Yeah.
true. I'd say, especially with dealing with Adult Swim, sometimes we had some really tight deadlines, and you would
Yeah.
really be like adding stuff at the last minute. So I
Oh,
totally
yeah.
agree with you.
No, for sure. So yeah, that's it. Maria's turn.
No, I'm just gonna piggyback off what you last said. Having a good attitude, so crucial regardless of the stage. I feel that no matter what stage of production you're in animation, it's always tends to be somewhat volatile. So you have to sort of be prepared to be adaptive regardless of what the situation can arise, because a million things can fall apart at any given point in time. You cannot. But my day-to-day really just varies in terms of which stage of production we're in. If we're in the radio play stage and we're just dealing with audio, scratch, sound design, everything, it is truly just me trying to visualize whatever is on the page and trying to make sense of it, and to sort of make it in the most basic description of it is truly just like imagining if it's just a podcast and just creating the tightest version of that, and try to like visualize like what boards could look like to this, imagining, okay, this is a sci-fi gun. What does a sci-fi gun sound like? Does it have like certain levers? Does it have certain mechanics? Is this um powered by anything? And to Priscilla's point, I think that's the part where the most creativity comes into play, where you truly have to be the spearhead visualizing what this is going to sound like. And then you are working with your supervising director, with your showrunners, to make sure that your interpretation of what's on the page speaks true to what their vision for the final product and for what the show is going to end up looking like. Once you're settled in that, we go into the next phase of animatics. Fun times, you have visuals to what you've just laid out. And so then it's a matter of like finessing all those hours of sound effects and everything you've done. Maybe they don't work one-to-one with what the board artists have done. Maybe the scripts changed since then. And so you will have to adjust, and you have to make sure that this is still one cohesive storyline, and you have to make sure that everything is still presentable and that it's fun and that the pacing is there and the story is still being told throughout it. And this is the part where you're collaborating a lot more with your directors, you're collaborating a lot more with your fellow departments. Sometimes audio department gets into play there. Storyboard comes in, designs come in, and you, depending on the production, can get really, really close to your showrunner, and that might be the person you end up seeing the most at any given point in time. Once that's all locked and you end up going into color, it's fully technical. The name of the game is how do you minimize as many retakes, because I feel like anyone who's worked on any animated show can tell you once you get those take ones back, there are significantly more technical errors than you would think would happen. Sometimes arms aren't attached to people. Arms should be attached to people. And so you have to like find creative ways in which you can fix this in the edit that could minimize having to say send this out to an animator to have them fix, to have them render out, to send back to you, where they could like maybe focus on like more uh time time consuming and heavier retakes as a whole. Maybe a scene doesn't really play once it's like in color, and so you intend to either rewrite, which is sort of a worst case scenario at that stage, or you have to find something else and edit around it. And I think that stage is the closest to editing in live action, right? Where everything's quote unquote finalized and you have to make the best with what you already have. Um, and at that point, it's all about just minimizing the work across the board, trying to offer support to your brother and sister departments as much as possible, and getting us to the finish line at the end of the day, to send it out to mix, to send it out for deliverables, and live your best life. And all throughout meetings, a lot of meetings. There is not a single day that goes without having some meeting with different heads of production, different heads of um, storyboard, animation, retake departments, so on and so forth.
Thank you for sharing. And I think to kind of piggyback off what you were saying with live action, you both have worked in live action, so I wanted to get your guys' experience with that and kind of give us an idea if there's any similarities that you've noticed between the animation pipeline and the live action pipeline, especially for those editors that are trying to transition from live action to animation.
In all honesty, they're almost exactly the same in terms of it's really all same skills, different application, right? And it's a different consideration for what the needs are in production. That's it. And it's learning, I to somewhat segue this and to someone do a tangent, the more you learn about different departments outside of editorial, the better your understanding of what your position is inside the production pipeline, and the better you can use the tools that you would normally use in live action, how use them in animation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, especially from
Yeah.
a post angle. You've got to understand and learn from every single department and kind of understand the ecosystem, and having to also try to make everybody's lives easier in development all the way to deliverables. It's like you become best friends with every single department because they're so crucial to meeting your deadlines and making it a really fun and very calm production as much as you can make it as calm as it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Editorial definitely has like the entire, sometimes it feels like you have everyone on your shoulders. Like you have to hold you're holding everyone up. Cause like all the different points of making something like eventually come to the editing room, right? It's like that's when you see what's working, what's not, what needs to be fixed, what can be fixed in editorial, what can't be fixed in editorial. Like you're kind of like it gets funneled through you. Yeah, I actually I agree, Maria. I like there is from the creative standpoint, like animation and live action are exactly the same. I actually I worked on Superman and Lois, which is a live action TV show, or was RIP. It got canceled after 4 seasons. But it's a superhero show. And the point I was making earlier about, and Maria was making too, about how building sound effects for something that doesn't exist, right, was a very real part of that job too. Yeah, Robot Chicken had a lot of, fantastical elements and a lot of like, I mean, like I had to build, there's lots of different like variations of sound effects on a show like that. But there's also, on a superhero show, you do have to figure out what Superman sounds like when he blasts off, right? You have to find out what superhero technology sounds like. And a lot of that was also building sound effects from the ground up. It was like a lot of creativity. From a technical perspective, it's very different. Like the pipeline it's so different. And at least for me, I was jumping softwares too. So I jumped from Premiere in animation to Avid in live action, which was an insane learning curve. And I went in completely cold, and I would not recommend anyone do that ever. But but that's how I did it. And it was a very, very stiff, like very steep learning curve. The two programs are so different, and you have to learn how to do things. You have to learn how to do the same things, but differently. And so from like the technical aspect, it's very different. And I honestly feel like in a lot of ways, live action can be less creative. It's more restricting in the sense that you're limited to the takes you have of your actors. And whereas in animatics, the world is your oyster, right? And that's only in animatics. It's like once you get past, like once you get into color, once you get into all that stuff, it's like no, you're stuck with what you have, with a little bit of variation, right? But in live action, it's like they film stuff, and it's very expensive to go back and do a pickup or do reshoot. God forbid you do a reshoot. So it's there is like that creative aspect where you're like, in a way, you're working with your actor because you're working with the performance that you're given. And there is that like creative relationship in that way, which is weird to say because the actor doesn't even know who you are half the time. But, whereas in animatics, if you're early enough on, and a scene isn't, or something isn't working, you can go back to the artist and be like, oh, can we change this? Can we adjust this? Or sometimes even like the editor can go in, like if you have Storyboard Pro or in Premiere, sometimes you can adjust things, and it's much more flexible. And I've always like loved animatics for that reason, because it really feels like you can do anything. But yeah, and like, but there are animatics in live action too, especially on a VFX heavy show like Superman, with a heavy VFX workflow. The the workflow of counting all those VFX shots is the same as counting shots in animation. And before we even get any VFX or any CGI, we have storyboards in there. So I was very pleasantly surprised that in the craziness of trying to learn a new software and join a new show, that I was like, oh wait, I saw storyboard, and I was like, wait, I know what this is. I know what to do with this. This one thing is familiar, at least.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the key, is always like finding how to translate, right? The same skills one way or another in order to
100%.
close the gap.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm looking at the time. I'm trying to get through as many questions as I can before we jump into Q&A. Do you guys hear my dogs barking? I have 3 pugs. So right, okay, good. I think
Can we see the 3 pugs?
they're at the front door, so I think it's Amazon. So I don't think so. I don't think tonight, but I
Damn.
think in one of
Okay.
these panels in the future, I'll grab my chunkier baby pug.
Yeah. I'll be texting you after this. I'll be expecting photos.
Sounds good. Let's see. Let me dive into another question. Let's do, can you all share some of your favorite moments working on any of the series animation shows that you worked on? You wanna go first, Maria?
Okay.
You can go first, Maria.
Um, so honestly, my favorite thing is always collaborating with like a new group of people every single time. You, again, editorial at any stage can be incredibly like um time consuming and sort of like enveloping it into your life in every way. So the people in your production end up being the people you see the most at any given point in time. But I think some of my favorite highlights have always been sort of going into mixes and seeing the final fruit of all of our labor just sort of finalized. Um, a few shows back, I got to be a supervising editor for a show called Praise Petey. And in that, the showrunner wanted me to be in all of the mix sessions to give notes to make sure that um, I was representative of all the notes that we've undergone from radio play to final deliverables to make sure that, the show encompassed sort of like the summation of all these notes and still rung true to the feel and tone of the show that we wanted to set. Um, and in a bit of a fangirl moment in that show, I was able to sit into a couple of voice actor records and have like a one-on-one relationship with a couple of them where I would pitch in ideas in terms of like, oh, can you try this line this way? Or can we grab some walla or some efforts of you doing it this way because the boards are painted this way or like the action is so and so in this sequence, and giving more context in those records was always a really fun time for me just to get another side of the process that you don't really normally get to see. You usually get the product of records instead of just being a part of it.
Oh, that's amazing.
Oh,
And
that must have been super cool. Sorry, I forgot I'm not on this panel. I'm just like, oh, I feel like an audience member.
no, no, me too. I'm like fangirling, and I'm like, I want to like hype up Maria in the chat, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna behave. I'm just gonna be fangirling quietly.
Oh, it's insanely cool. Like, I can't imagine because it's like you're right. We only get to see like what we get is what we get, right? At the end. And sometimes you can make requests to get something after the fact. But yeah, that must have been insanely cool to have
Oh
that
yeah,
opportunity.
and I feel like to your point, that's something that isn't really like discussed all that much, the ability to actually be able to send requests out, which is why I always advocate people to learn everyone or to meet everyone they can in their production, know exactly what they do, because it can truly be just as easy as reaching out to your records coordinator or to your script coordinator and just being like, hey, editorial needs X, Y, and Z. Maybe you can't personally be in the record, but
Yeah.
you know someone who is in there. And at the end of the day, we're all trying to get to the finish line together. So there's no
Yeah.
reason for you not to be able to express what you need to do the best you can
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
production.
Yeah, it's a collaboration at the end of the day. It's like
Absolutely.
that's the secret, everyone. If you make friends with everyone that you that you share a credit sequence with, like you can ask for favors. Just make friends with everyone.
Truly.
Yeah. I forgot what the question was. I
What
forgot what the question
is
was.
what was your favorite moment that you've had working on the series
That's
show?
right.
No, no worries.
Sorry. I think you know what? I had a different answer to this one, but I have to say I agree with Maria's. It's like I've always felt like it's the people that keep me in this industry and it's not necessarily the work. Like I love the work, I do, but it's, I grew up doing a lot of theater and like musical theater, and I've always had like a really big love for a bunch of people coming together and building something together. And it's not always easy, but like it really is like the people that keep me in this and like the friends you make along the way, which sounds like it sounds like a Disney Channel like quote or something, but I don't know, like the work is fun and I feel very lucky to have even like to be able to do something creative like for work, but it's the people that are like the main reason that I feel like I do this. And if I have to like, if I had to share like one single moment, it would definitely be like getting an animatic editor credit on Robot Chicken because I've been cutting animatics just I've been asking to cut animatics since like day one on that show. I worked with two editors on that show. The first one was Becca Berry, who I eventually went on to work with on Superman and Lois. She hired me again somehow. And then I worked with another editor named Jeff Newman, who was just wonderful, and I still am in touch with to this day. And like when Jeff Newman took over, like I had already been cutting stuff with Becca because she encouraged me to. So I asked Jeff if I could keep doing that. And he did. He let me, having never met me before. He just knew that I was on the show. And, I didn't ask for a credit. I was like very green. So I didn't feel like I could. And it didn't even occur to me to ask for a credit, but he kind of told me he was going to ask for me because, if anyone doesn't know, like your editor is like your boss, on these shows. So they kind of have to, if they advocate for you, it's like a big deal. And you kind of need them to advocate for you for something like a credit. So yeah, like Jeff was very adamant. He was like, you've been doing this work for almost 2 years. We were on that show for 18 months. And he was like, you've been doing this work. You should get a credit. Like, even if it's not for the whole season, you should get a credit on these last two episodes. And again, it wasn't something that I asked for. It was just that he was just like, it meant a lot to me as and I was kind of more starting out. Again, it was my first scripted show. So yeah, that was definitely like, I actually have a screenshot of the credit page and I have it as my background on my work laptop because I'm like, because it just, it was such a big moment for me and it just like has always meant a lot. And yeah, that's my story.
Yeah, that's amazing. And now at Sony, we have Jeff. So
Yeah.
Jeff has always been incredible to have. We don't want to let him go. So
Oh, he's so great. I
yeah,
love him.
yeah. Let's see, what time is it? Let's do one more question, and we'll open up to Q&A.
Okay.
Let's see. Where are my questions? Okay. For those interested in becoming an editor or enhancing their skills, what would you recommend in regards to preparing a portfolio, learning specific programs, and so forth? In addition, what would you suggest for someone pursuing an assistant editor role versus pursuing a lead editor role?
Okay.
I know I asked a lot. It's
Yeah,
a
I
very
might need to
chunky
break this
question.
down. So what would I recommend people starting in? First off, learn everything. You don't have to be a master at it right away. You don't even have to be like perfected to get your foot in the door. But I feel like a good baseline knowledge on the Adobe suite, Avid, even though it's not as commonly used in like the animation space, it's always a wonderful tool to have, and it's always going to be a staple in our industry regardless. And having that vocabulary right off the gate always going to be helpful. To Priscilla's to what you mentioned earlier regarding Storyboard Pro. Storyboard Pro is a wonderful program to like know and understand to at least in my time as an assistant editor, I ended up having to use that program more times than I ever thought I would have to in order to help my editors with a bunch of technical problems. And really, the name of the game is learning how to troubleshoot for anything that could possibly happen. I think the best AEs that I've had have always been able to anticipate what the problem could be and have a solution like ready to go so that the least amount of time is wasted and we can just like get back to, collaborating, creating, and moving on to the next goalpost. And I'm sorry, what was the rest of the question?
Um, I got distracted by your answer because in my head I'm like noting it too. So in addition, what would you suggest for someone pursuing a position as an assistant editor versus a lead editor role? Because
For
at
sure.
least from myself on the Sony end, we have very specific criteria for assistant editors versus lead editors. I wanted to get your guys' take when it comes to series animation and what you would suggest for editors that are going into series animation for these two specific roles.
For sure. For assistant editors, I feel like, and Priscilla, I'm sure you have a lot more insight into this. I just think that asking as many questions as you can, like right off the gate, is a good way to go and a good foundation. At least for me, I've never been once bothered by having an assistant be like, how do you do this? Why did we change that? What's going on here? Because at the end of the day, the pool of editors and assistant editors is a small one in animation. The likelihood that you'll end up working together in the long run is high. So I see no reason to not share that wealth of knowledge as much as possible as early on. So truly ask as many questions, ask to be involved in cutting animatics, in like doing a first pass of a radio play, in just like hounding sound effects or creating Walla libraries and just getting your feet wet as much as possible into the creative pipeline. And as far as like lead editor to, as far as like going into lead editor or editorial as a whole, it's all about repetition in those early stages of getting your feet wet, right? And establishing as many connections and relationships as you can going up and just showing like, hey, this is what I do. This is my skill set. This is what I'm capable of. And more often than not, people are looking for people that they can work with, not necessarily the best technically, because you can be an amazing editor and you can know every single hotkey that is available in any software. But with how collaborative post-production is in the animation pipeline and how integral editorial is right from the start in pre-production all the way through final delivery, you're gonna have to be so comfortable with working with people day in and day out. People are going to want to work with people that they like and people that they know can be adaptable when the going gets tough because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when things go wrong. And I feel like um, the assistants that end up going into editors and the editors that go into leads are the ones that are able to adapt the most to those situations and being able to articulate exactly what needs to go down at any given stage, find solutions, but also be sort of like the social greasing of the wheels that make sure that everyone's still on board and to sort of like remind everyone that we're still all in this together and we're still trying to make a show and a product that we can all really be proud of. Because I feel that, especially like once you're heading a session, it becomes more of a group therapy session in terms of like having these creatives that have been very attached to the project from its conception, now seeing it visualized. Some showrunners take it very well. Some showrunners have like a little bit of trouble in terms of just like, that isn't exactly what I visualized. This isn't playing the way that I thought it would be on the page, and so on and so forth. And you have to not only be receptive to that, but also understand like, okay, what's the note behind the note? And what is it exactly that they're bumping on? Because sometimes hearing, oh, this scene isn't playing, it might not be the scene. The scene might be the best scene you've ever edited, and this isn't the problem at all. It could be just like a tiny piece of the puzzle of a bigger picture problem, right? And I feel like learning how to differentiate that early on will only be a bigger asset as you continue to progress on your in your career.
Yeah, I like couldn't agree more. I think like editorial has this reputation of like the editor in a dark room with no windows and who is like kind of a loner. And the truth is that like editorial is like a deeply human part of the the filmmaking process or the TV making process because you are listening, you are having to take in like so many people's opinions and kind of having to figure out what like the note behind the note, like figuring out what they actually want or what the scene needs or what like it's heavy, it's so human. There's something it's so human from like interpreting the script to animatics or to the footage or whatever onto your timeline to then like getting notes back. It's very like it's a lot of it is intuition you can't teach. You know, like you kind of have to you can sharpen that muscle, but it's very difficult to teach someone, I think, how to be good at that part of it. And also all of your advice is 100% correct. I just want to double down on that, if that means anything. But especially, I really love the point you made about asking questions because it's so true. I think like most people, I think the advice is usually like, don't be afraid to ask a stupid question. There are no stupid questions. And my advice is ask stupid questions. You know, like take the stupidest question you have and ask it because I guarantee you, you're not the first person to ask it. And I've never regretted asking a stupid question. Like I have it in my head, like maybe I'll like mull over it for like an hour or two and I'll be like, I don't want to ask this, I don't want to ask that. And but I always end up asking it and I never regret it. Like I'll always come away like learning something new. Like worst case, you ask something that might be kind of obvious, but either way, like you didn't know, like, and that's not your fault, you know, and take it from someone who has jumped from like from animation to live action, from Premiere to Avid, from like someone who's had to jump to vastly different workflows. Like, yeah, I asked a lot of stupid questions when I first got into Avid. I promise you that. But like if I didn't ask those questions, I wouldn't be the assistant that I am today. And so it was worth it. Oh no, I felt bad about my question for like 20 minutes. Like it's the worst thing that happened, right? And yeah, like it's just yeah, but ask dumb questions. Have a list. Have a list of the dumbest questions you have and then ask them. And if anyone makes you feel bad for that, like they suck.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I think like especially in animation, like I've always been nervous about asking questions, but everyone has always been super nice. I don't think I've ever had one encounter where they're like, "Why are you asking me this? Leave me
Yeah.
alone."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
For
I feel
real.
like editorial has always been super supportive, and I'm so happy to
Mhm.
be within this space because yeah, it does become a community, and the community is so small.
Yeah. And we've
That
all been
be
there. Like we've all been at the beginning or like, and the technology changes so fast that like,
yeah.
you know, like things are always changing, you're always learning. So yeah.
Truly, I mean, to your point, there have been instances where like an assistant has come up with me to me with like a question of like, hey, how do you do X, Y, and Z this way? And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, I've never actually done it that way.
Yeah.
Find out together. And it can be like a moment in which you both learn and you both grow, and it can be really cool. So
Yeah.
think of it not only as like doing it a favor to yourself, but like also like potentially like opening like a new way of thinking for like someone else and just
Yeah.
like broadening someone's horizon on like different workflows.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You will do something the same way for 5 years and then you'll meet someone who like, does it a different way and it's like way better. And you're like, oh, hang on. I just learned something.
No, it's groundbreaking.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, since we are running out of time, let me try to get through as many questions for our Q&A. Earlier in the chat, we had somebody ask, do we need to learn Storyboard Pro to be an animatic editor? I've only used Avid and Premiere.
Might
No.
be a Maria question.
You don't, you don't need to. I do think it's helpful that, especially in the assistant editor space, just because in the productions I've worked on, they've all been Storyboard Pro led. Sometimes some productions will be Flash. I've heard of some that are just with Photoshop JPEG files, which is a chaotic choice, but it's a choice nonetheless. And I found that a lot of sort of like communication errors that can happen between like editorial and Storyboard Pro can sometimes be like softened just by like learning the language of like what Storyboard Pro is. I'm not saying that you need to like learn how to like build an animatic there, but like understand that like, okay, this program works with like vector layers. You can turn layers on and off. You can export this as an XML and as a QuickTime. You can get assets this way, sort of situation, and get a rudimentary like understanding of like how the software that your production is on works, I feel like is always an asset rather than not. And
Yeah.
you definitely don't need it to have a very successful career. The other editor that I'm working on this show on has never touched Storyboard Pro a day in his life, and he is doing very well for himself. And there has been no issues whatsoever. Storyboard Pro for me in my journey has been essential because essentially the first show that I was on had major problems with Storyboard Pro and Premiere, in which the XMLs coming from Premiere to Storyboard Pro weren't going one to one. So, like a scene that maybe takes like a minute to complete was going into Storyboard Pro and it was coming at 4.5 minutes. Now, that discrepancy is jarring to work with and frustrating from like the storyboarder's angle, the director's angle, and then editorial's angle. And it was my job to understand why that was happening. And essentially, I was told, fix it. And after like 3.5 months, we found a workaround of like, okay, we need to export in Premiere this certain way and send it over using this pipeline so that Storyboard Pro can understand it, the metadata is all right, and then it's one to one. That way, my editor would receive everything and he was happy. He could just focus on editing and not have to worry about re-editing the edits that he had already done. And we could just continue moving forward. It's more so of like a helpful tip and like an asset in case it comes up, but definitely not a requirement.
We have so many questions that I'm like behind the scenes being like, which one do I ask next? Okay. Animation has a very tight total runtime, whether it's episodic, TV, feature. Where do you begin with trying to fit it in the project that you're editing into that timeline or that total runtime window?
I think it's,
It depends what you're working on,
yeah.
right? Because I know broadcast TV will have very strict like time restraints, but I know streaming, like I think I heard once that like, Netflix will give you like 2 minutes of leeway, and versus TV, like actual TV, you have to be exactly on time. Maybe am I misunderstanding the question. Is it a total runtime question or is it like an editing
Yes,
question?
like
Sorry.
total runtime question. So like with let's say Robot Chicken, I think we had to like keep it down to like under 15 minutes or a very specific runtime.
Yeah.
So when we're getting those shots and trying to compress it down, especially if we're pulling sketches at the last minute, how do you keep that Adult Swim like runtime max?
Oh man, that's editing, baby. I
Yeah.
do remember. So the way Robot Chicken works is like you get the script, and the script has, I think, like 20 sketches, but not all of those sketches are gonna make it into the final episode because it does like, yeah, it was an 11-minute runtime and 15 with like commercials. But when I worked with the first editor, Becca, she had a background in TV and more drama than like sketch comedy. So her assemblies were insanely long. Her assemblies were like 20 minutes long. And I think they were aiming for maybe 15 minutes with every single sketch at first. So that was like, yeah, you just kind of have to, at least like on a first pass, they wanted everything in. You have to have everything in there. And generally, like when in editorial, you stick to like your first pass isn't like your true first pass. It's like everything kind of that you're given. And then through like the collaborative, like the notes process, you kind of whittle it down to the best version of the show or the film. And that's kind of the job, honestly. Like that's like you're all trying to like hone this like marble statue, right? Like down into the best version of itself. And yeah, sometimes you do lose funny sketches and it hurts your heart. And sometimes you lose moments that you really want in a show that, and you can fight for that as much as you want in editorial. But at the end of the day, it's like whoever's signing your paychecks gets to decide what stays and what goes. So yeah.
No, 100%. I feel like it's our job in editorial to be mindful of that and to make sure that we like keep to those timelines because like the shows that I've worked on, it's always been like 21 minutes hard out, but then like act 1 has to be between like um your cold open can't exceed 3 minutes. Your act 1 has to be between 7 to 9 minutes. Your act 2 has to be between 5 to 6. Your tag can only be so on, so forth. And so there's unfortunately a lot of math involved in terms of just like adding up and making sure that you're conscious of this, like throughout every stage of the process. There's in the radio play stage an understanding that it's going to at first be longer than what you're intending. The show I'm currently working on right now, our scripts are continuously 46 pages long. And in no world is a 46-page script going to equate to a 21-minute episode. You're looking at easily like 23 at best, maybe 25. And that's with having breakneck pacing all the way throughout, right? And so your job is essentially to first and foremost give the client what they want, which is at that stage just everything that's on the page and make it as best as possible. Once you go into storyboards and animatics, once you go into that stage, before you send it out to color, you have to start having those conversations with your directors. You have to start having those conversations with your showrunners. Like, listen, this is our total runtime. This is our act breakdown. What do we, what can we get rid of? And you're essentially helping others to kill their darlings to make sure that we can like get to the other side while still maintaining the integrity of the episode. And so we always end up sending to color with like maybe a minute over than what your final deliverable and like actual like air time product is going to be. And at that point, it's just about trimming the fat and trimming like what doesn't really play once we're at that colored stage and once we're at the final moments. So it's an ever-going process and it's ever-going communication with your directors and showrunners.
Yeah. I know we're running out of time, but one time there was an episode of Superman I worked on where one of our acts came out to 4 minutes, which is insanely short for a 45-minute show, 42-minute show. And so they had to go back and write a new scene and then film it so that we had enough like time to add back into, which is like that's I worked on that show for 3 seasons. It's the only time that happened, but
That's
yeah,
crazy.
sometimes that happens. Sometimes you have to do that because you need to make time. Yeah.
Well, we ran out of time, unfortunately, and I want to answer some of these questions so badly, but um,
DM me
what
on
it is.
Instagram.
Yes,
Yes,
I was gonna
absolutely.
say one of these questions was asking if they can connect with you via LinkedIn or via email. So I am going to share this slide really quick. Where is it? Okay. You can follow Maria and Priscilla on Instagram. I put their social media handles right here. And then follow us on Viva la Animacion. We'll have a recap of this panel and I believe a recording of this panel. So stay tuned for that. I'm gonna run back over here. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for your attending this panel. Especially a major thank you to Priscilla and Maria for being panelists. Especially this being my first moderating time.
You
I
did
really
great.
appreciate thank you. I really appreciate you all making this panel really incredible. And yes, please follow Priscilla and Maria. Let me run back one more time. I think I went too fast. Please follow them on socials, and you can also reach out to us if you want a more direct contact to both of them for any of your editorial or post questions. Stay tuned for our LA events. I did mention in the chat that there will be a post-production panel that will feature me. So I'll go more in depth into post-production, the animation pipeline, especially the animation pipeline for Sony Animation. So thank you so much, everybody, for jumping on this call tonight.